Hello everyone, and welcome to a story that will make you question loyalty and the true meaning of power. Before we begin, subscribe to the channel and like this video so you don't miss a single impactful story. And now, get ready, because what you're about to hear will take your breath away. The needle on the fuel gauge of her old Chevy trembled in the red zone, a perfect reflection of the emptiness Amelia felt in her soul. The rain fell furiously on the windshield, blurring the lights of New York City, the city that had devoured her and was now spitting her out without mercy. Just an hour earlier, she had a husband, a small apartment she called home, and the fragile hope of the baby growing inside her. Now, all she had left was the echo of her husband Ethan's last words. "I can't have a child. It'll drag me down. My future is worth more than this, more than you." He had chosen ambition. He had chosen another woman, and he had cast her aside, pregnant and penniless, unaware that the woman he had just thrown away could buy his entire future with the loose change in her pocket. This isn't the story of a scorned woman. It's the story of an empire fighting back. Life, for Amelia and Ethan Thorne, had been like a fragile crystal snow globe, beautiful within its small, hermetic world. Their fifth-floor walk-up in a less glamorous neighborhood was tiny. The pipes groaned in winter, and the smell of the neighbor's stew was a permanent resident. But for Amelia, it was a palace. It was the place where Ethan, her handsome and ambitious husband, would come home from his job as a junior associate at Coleman & Associates, take off his one good suit, and become simply her Ethan. He would rub her tired feet after her double shifts at the coffee shop and whisper promises of a future where their biggest worry would be choosing which European city to spend the summer in. Amelia had met Ethan in college. She, an orphan with no family to speak of, told him a story that evoked his sympathy and made him feel like her protector. She worked tirelessly, putting her own dreams on hold to support his. Every dollar she earned in tips went into their joint fund, a jar on their kitchen counter filled with her crumpled bills and his loose change. She believed in him with a fierce, unwavering loyalty that was absolute. The first crack in their snow globe appeared 6 months ago when Ethan was assigned a major project directly with Chloe Coleman, the daughter of the firm's founding partner, Coleman. Chloe was everything Amelia was not: poised, sophisticated, with a lineage that reeked of old money and an air of superiority that followed her like expensive perfume. Ethan started coming home later. The smell of coffee grease on his clothes was replaced by the faint scent of Chloe's Chanel No. 5. He spoke less of their future and more of his career path. "Chloe thinks I have real potential," he'd say, his eyes shining with a new, harder light. "She's introducing me to people, important people." Amelia, ever the supportive wife, just smiled and nodded, ignoring the knot of unease tightening in her stomach. She told herself this was the break they had been waiting for him, for them. Then, 2 blue lines on a plastic test changed everything. She had planned a special dinner, a small splurge on a steak and a cheap bottle of sparkling cider. She imagined his face, the surprise, the joy. She imagined they would sit on their rickety sofa, hands on her still flat belly, planning a new, brighter future with a third member. When he finally came in, long after midnight, he didn't even notice the carefully set table. He was distracted, agitated, and he smelled of whiskey and that damned perfume. "Ethan, I have something to tell you," she began, her voice trembling with a mix of excitement and nerves. "Not now, Amelia," he snapped, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. "I had an incredible night. A damn good night." "I did too," she smiled, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. Chloe and her father took me to the Century Club. Me. Can you believe it? The steak grew cold on the plate. The fizz in the cider went flat. That's wonderful, honey. But this is important. She took a breath. Ethan, I'm pregnant. The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. The air in the small apartment seemed to solidify, pressing in on them. Ethan looked at her, his expression shifting from surprise to disbelief, and then to something cold and horribly calculating. He slumped onto the edge of the sofa, his head in his hands. He didn't ask her if she was okay. He didn't ask her if she was happy. His first words were, "God, no, not now." "What do you mean, not now?" Amelia asked, her heart beginning to beat with a painful, panicked rhythm. "This is a good thing. A baby, Ethan. Our baby." He looked up, and the man she loved was gone. In his place was a stranger, a man with the cold, calculating eyes of a boardroom shark. "A baby?" he scoffed, the word sounding like poison in his mouth. "Amelia, do you have any idea what's happening in my life right now? The Colemans are talking about making me a junior partner. Partner, Chloe. She sees a future for me. For us." "For us?" The word got stuck in her throat. "What about us?" "This," he said, gesturing to their small apartment, to the life they had built. "This was a stepping stone, Amelia. I thought you understood. A waitress and a baby. That's not the image of a junior partner at Coleman and Associates. It's an anchor, a liability." The cruelty of his words hit her like a physical punch. She staggered back, her hand instinctively going to her belly. "So what are you saying?" she whispered, though she already knew the answer. "I'm saying you need to get rid of it," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "It's the only logical solution." Tears streamed down her face, hot and silent. "No, I won't. I could never." He stood up, his face a mask of frustration and contempt. "Then you're a fool. Chloe and I are getting serious. Her father approves. This is my moment, Amelia. My one shot at the life I deserve. I won't let you, or that," he gestured dismissively at her belly, "ruin it for me." The front door opened without a knock. Chloe Coleman was there, wrapped in a coat, looking at Amelia with an expression of pure disdain. "Ethan, darling, is this sorted?" Her voice was soft as iced poison. "Chloe," Ethan said, his voice instantly changing, becoming softer. Supplicating. Chloe ignored him and took a step inside the room, her eyes sweeping over Amelia's worn maternity blouse. "I see, so the little charity case is trying to trap you. How cliché." She pulled a checkbook from her designer bag. "Let's cut the drama. How much does it take for you to disappear and take care of your little problem?" Amelia felt a surge of rage, so potent it momentarily eclipsed her pain. "My baby isn't a problem, and my husband isn't for sale." Chloe raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "Oh, darling, I'm afraid he already is, and I paid the asking price." She looked at Ethan, who couldn't meet her gaze or Amelia's. He just stared at the floor. The image of a coward. "Get out!" Amelia said, her voice low and dangerous. "Both of you, get out of my house!" "Your house?" Ethan finally spoke, his voice dripping with condescension. "The lease is in my name, Amelia. The job that pays for it is mine. You have nothing." He walked to the closet, pulled out his one beat-up suitcase, and threw it on the floor. "You're the one who has to leave. I'll have my lawyer send you the divorce papers. Don't try to contact me." "Ethan, please!" she pleaded. The fight drained from her, replaced by a deep, cold despair. "Don't do this. I love you. We're going to have a baby." He didn't look at her. He simply stood by the door, holding it open as the cold, rainy night air rushed in. "The life I want is out there, Amelia, and it doesn't include you." Chloe smiled a triumphant, cruel smirk. She walked over to Ethan, looped her arm through his, and gave Amelia one last dismissive look. "Goodbye, Amelia. Try to have a nice life." The door closed with a click, a sound as definitive as a gunshot. Amelia was left alone in the middle of the room, with the uneaten steak, the flat cider, and the shattered snow globe of her life surrounding her. All she had left was the small secret life growing inside her, and a name she hadn't spoken in 6 years. A name that could buy and sell Ethan Thorne and the entire Coleman dynasty 1,000 times over. Vance. She was Amelia Vance, and her period of playing poor was officially and painfully over. The city lights, once symbols of shared dreams, were now just a cruel, blurred watercolor through her tear-filled eyes. What would you do in Amelia's shoes? Would you fight, or would you give up? Let me know in the comments below. The return of the heir. Amelia drove aimlessly, her car's sputtering engine a sick parody of her own failing heart. Every corner held a memory. The coffee shop where they had their first date. The park where he had proposed with a ring he bought on credit. The movie theater where they shared popcorn and whispered about the future. It was all a lie. A carefully constructed fiction she had willingly co-authored. The car finally gave out in a desolate alley slick with rain, miles from anywhere she recognized. The silence was absolute, broken only by the drumming of the rain on the roof and her own harsh sobs. She was homeless, jobless, pregnant, and completely alone. The check Chloe had scoffed at was still on the table, an insult she would have burned before cashing. For a few terrifying hours, she knew true desperation. She felt the cold, hard edge of rock bottom. It was there, huddled in the driver's seat of a dead car, that the pain began to curdle. It twisted and hardened, cooling from a sea of molten hurt into something sharp and solid. Steel. The girl who cried and loved Ethan Thorne died in that alley. In her place, a woman she hadn't been in a long time began to awaken. She found a payphone, a relic from another time, just like the part of her that was about to be resurrected. Her fingers were numb as she dialed a number etched into her memory, a number she had sworn to herself she would never call again. It rang once, twice, before a crisp, familiar voice answered, a voice that belonged to a world of tailored suits and mahogany desks. "Vance Global!" "Mr. Peterson," she whispered, her voice cracking. "It's me. It's Amelia." There was a pause on the other end of the line, a silence so deep she thought he might have hung up. "Ms. Vance, my God, where are you? Are you all right?" The professional veneer was gone, replaced by genuine, urgent concern. "No, Mr. Peterson, I'm not all right," she said, a new wave of tears threatening. "I need you. I need to come home." The words felt strange, like a language she had forgotten. Home wasn't the cramped apartment. Home was a sprawling, multi-billion-dollar global conglomerate, a dynasty built by her formidable and controlling father, Mr. Vance. She had run from that world 6 years earlier, desperate for a normal life, for a love that wasn't a transaction, for an identity that wasn't just the Vance heiress. She had found what she thought was love, and it had turned out to be the most brutal transaction of all. Within an hour, a sleek black car, so out of place in the grimy alley, it looked like a spaceship, pulled up beside her. A chauffeur in a black suit opened the door, and Amelia, in her cheap, damp clothes, stepped out of one life and into another. The journey back was a blur. She was taken to a private airfield, to a Gulf Stream that was on standby for her family. Mr. Peterson, in his early 60s, her father's most trusted advisor and the man who had known her since she was a child, was waiting for her on board. He was older, grayer, but his eyes held the same quiet intelligence and kindness she remembered. He didn't pry or ask questions. He simply wrapped her in a cashmere blanket, ordered her a hot meal, and spoke to her in soft tones. "Your father never stopped looking for you, Amelia," he said quietly, as the jet ascended into the clouds, leaving the city of her heartbreak behind. His methods were unorthodox, but he never lost hope. Her father, Mr. Vance, was an industry titan, a ruthless negotiator who saw the world in terms of assets and liabilities. He had wanted to merge her life with another powerful family to secure the dynasty. Her refusal, her escape, had been the ultimate act of defiance. When they landed in Geneva, her father wasn't there to meet her. It was a calculated move. She knew it. He was reasserting his power. She was driven to the sprawling Vance estate on the shores of Lake Geneva, a place she hadn't seen since she was 21. The staff lined the great hall, their faces impassive. It was no longer a home. It was a headquarters. She spent the first few weeks in a state of suspended animation, healing physically, but nurturing a cold, growing rage inside. Mr. Peterson became her confidant. She told him everything about Ethan: the coffee shop, the lies, the pregnancy, the brutal final betrayal. She left out no detail. Mr. Peterson listened, his expression hardening with every word. When she finished, he looked at her with a steady gaze. "What do you want to do, Amelia?" The old Amelia would have wanted to hide, to raise her child in quiet obscurity, but that Amelia was gone. "I want to learn," she said, her voice clear and strong for the first time in months. "I ran from this world because I didn't understand it. Now I want to control it. I want you to teach me everything my father was going to teach me. Finance, acquisitions, corporate law, strategy, everything." "And the Costas? The Colemans?" Mr. Peterson asked. Already knowing the answer, a chilling smile touched Amelia's lips. "They're a liability, and the first lesson of Vance Global is that we cut our liabilities, but not quickly. I want them to build their house of cards as high as they can. I want them to feel safe, successful, and powerful, and then I'm going to pull the one card at the bottom and watch it all come crashing down." Her father finally summoned her to his office a month later. The room was intimidating, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the lake and a desk the size of a small car. Mr. Vance sat behind it, a man who radiated power. He was older, but his eyes were as sharp as ever. "You were a fool," he said, his voice grave. It wasn't an accusation. It was a statement of fact. "Yes, I was." Amelia nodded, meeting his gaze without flinching. "I was a fool to think I could find value in a world that doesn't understand it. I was a fool to trade a birthright for a fantasy." A flicker of something, of surprise, of respect, crossed his face. "And now I'm your daughter again," she said. "But I won't be a pawn in your game, Father. I'll be a player. I want my seat at the table. I want control of my own trust fund, and I want access to the best tutors and analysts Vance Global employs. In return, I will make this company more money than you ever dreamed of." For the next 4 years, Amelia disappeared from the world. She plunged into a crucible of education. She worked 18-hour days, fueled by coffee and a burning desire for vengeance. She learned to dissect a balance sheet with surgical precision, to spot market trends before they happened, to wage corporate warfare with the ruthlessness of a seasoned general. She was no longer just the heiress. She was becoming the empress. 7 months after her return to Geneva, she gave birth to a healthy son. She named him Noah. He had her eyes and a quiet strength she treasured. As she held him in her arms in the sterile, luxurious hospital suite, looking out at the snow-capped Alps, she made him a silent promise. He wasn't the product of a broken heart. He wasn't a symbol of betrayal. He was the reason. He was the future. He was the sole shareholder of her heart, and the motivation for the war she was about to wage. She let 5 years pass. 5 years for Ethan to climb his filthy stepping stone. 5 years for him and Chloe to become the golden couple of the city's financial scene. 5 years for them to forget about the pregnant waitress he had thrown out in the rain. 5 years was enough time. The statute of limitations on his betrayal was up. It was time to return to the city that had cast her out. Not as Amelia Thorne, the broken victim, but as A.M. Vance, the architect of his ruin. Do you think Amelia's revenge is justified, or is she going too far? Share your opinion in the comments below. The final confrontation and the gilded cage. 5 years had been very, very good to Ethan Thorne. He lived in a sprawling penthouse with panoramic city views, a world away from the 5th-floor walk-up he now recalled with a shiver. His wardrobe consisted of bespoke suits, his wrist sported a Patek Philippe, and his garage housed a gleaming black Maserati. He was no longer a junior associate. He was a senior vice president at Coleman & Associates, and his engagement to Chloe Coleman made him the heir apparent to her father's throne. He had become everything he had ever wanted to be: successful, respected, powerful, and rich. He and Chloe were the darlings of the city's society. Their photos regularly graced the society pages. They were the perfect couple, a union of old money and new ambition. The memory of Amelia had faded into a boring, inconvenient footnote in the story of his life. Ethan had convinced himself he had done the right thing, the only thing a man with his ambition could have done. He had made a clean break. He had sent the divorce papers to the last address he had for her, a rundown women's shelter she had apparently stayed at for a week before disappearing completely. They came back unopened. He had hired a private investigator for a month, more to appease his own conscience than for any real concern. The investigator found nothing. Amelia Thorne, the poor, pregnant waitress, had simply vanished. Ethan told himself she had probably met someone else, some other simple man, for her simple life. He imagined she had had the child and was living somewhere in subsidized housing, a fate he considered both regrettable and deserved. It was a neat, clean story that allowed him to sleep soundly in his 1,000-thread-count sheets. He had escaped. He had won. His life was a gilded cage, and he was blissfully unaware of the bars. The first hint of a storm came on a Tuesday morning. It didn't arrive as a thunderclap, but as a whisper in the hallowed halls of Coleman & Associates. A major real estate development deal they were financing, the ambitious Project Phoenix, had hit a snag. A small, unknown investment firm, Orion Holdings, had quietly bought up the debt of 2 key subcontractors, effectively giving them leverage over the entire project timeline. Mr. Coleman, a man whose temper was as legendary as his fortune, was furious. "Who the hell is Orion Holdings?" he thundered in the boardroom, his voice echoing off the polished mahogany. "Find out who is behind this, and make this problem go away, Ethan. This project is my legacy." "On it, Mr. Coleman," Ethan said, with his usual smooth confidence, though a tickle of unease ran down his spine. It was a minor problem, an annoyance, but it was sloppy. He put his top analysts on it. The reports that came back were frustratingly vague. Orion Holdings was a shell company, its ownership hidden behind layers of international corporations. But the money, the real capital, seemed to trace back to a single powerful source, a European private equity firm that had been making aggressive and brilliant moves all over the globe. The name was whispered with a mix of awe and fear in financial circles. Vance Capital. The name meant nothing to Ethan. It was just another shark in a sea of sharks. He spent a week trying to initiate a dialogue with Orion Holdings, but his calls went unanswered. His emails were ignored. They weren't negotiating. They were just sitting there, a silent, immovable object in the path of his biggest deal. The pressure from Mr. Coleman mounted daily. His relationship with Chloe, which was based more on mutual ambition than genuine affection, began to show cracks under the strain. "You told my father you had this under control," Chloe said one afternoon, her voice sharp as she sipped her Chardonnay. "This little setback is making you look incompetent." "It's not a setback. It's a strategic play by a competitor. I'm handling it," he insisted, loosening his tie. He began to have strange dreams, dreams of rain and a stalled car, the faint smell of coffee, the accusing eyes of a woman he had tried so hard to forget. He would wake up in a cold sweat, the luxury of his penthouse feeling like a prison. He dismissed it as stress. A month later, a second blow landed. A reputable financial news outlet ran a story detailing potential environmental regulation violations at the Project Phoenix construction site. It was a minor infraction, something that would normally be handled with a quiet fine. But the story was written with such precision, backed by leaked internal memos, that it caused a nightmare. Coleman and Associates' stock dropped 7%. Investors got nervous. Ethan felt like he was fighting a ghost. These attacks were too precise, too well-timed. Someone wasn't just competing with them. They were trying to dismantle them, piece by piece. The source of the leak was impossible to trace, but the journalist who ran the story had recently received a very generous grant from a philanthropic foundation. A foundation whose primary benefactor was, according to public records, the Vance family. Still, the name meant nothing. It was a coincidence. It had to be. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place during a tense meeting with the firm's board. Their primary lender for Project Phoenix, a major bank, was demanding a portion of their loan back due to the project's instability. It was a crushing blow. "Who is behind this?" Mr. Coleman demanded, his face purple with rage. "Who is pressuring them?" The firm's head of legal, a man named Peterson, cleared his throat nervously. "Sir, it seems that over the last 6 months, Vance Capital has become a significant, albeit silent, partner in the bank's global lending division. They have acquired a controlling stake." Ethan felt a sudden, inexplicable chill. Vance Capital. The name was no longer just a name. It was a specter, a phantom hand, guiding all of his misfortunes. "I want a meeting," Mr. Coleman roared. "I don't care who this Vance is. Get them in a room. We'll make a deal. Everyone has a price." Peterson paled slightly. "That's the other thing, sir. We've been trying. They've been elusive. But their primary representative in New York has finally agreed to a meeting to discuss the full acquisition of Project Phoenix's distressed assets." "Who is it?" Ethan asked, leaning forward. "Who are we meeting?" Peterson looked down at the file in his hands. "The representative is flying in from Geneva tomorrow. All communications have been through her chief of staff. We don't know much, only her name and title." He paused, flipping through a page. "She is the CEO of European operations for the Vance portfolio. Her name is A.M. Vance." The air in the 40th floor boardroom of Coleman and Associates was thick with a tension that the state-of-the-art climate control system could not disperse. Ethan stood next to Mr. Coleman, both men staring at the city skyline, their reflections staring back at them like ghosts. They were in their best suits, corporate armor, for a battle they didn't quite understand. Chloe was standing slightly behind them, arms crossed, her expression a mask of nervous irritation. For Ethan, the last 24 hours had been a blur of anxiety. The name Vance had become an obsession. He had spent the night frantically searching the internet, finding only polished antiseptic articles about a reclusive and incredibly wealthy European family and their sprawling, impenetrable empire, Vance Global. There were photos of the patriarch, Mr. Vance, a man who looked like he could command armies with a single glance, but of A.M. Vance, the CEO of European operations, there was nothing. No photos, no interviews, no social media presence. She was a ghost, a cipher, with a reputation for ruthless efficiency. "Remember, we go in strong," Mr. Coleman growled, adjusting his tie for the 10th time. "They want Project Phoenix. They can have it, but they're going to pay a premium. This is a negotiation, not a surrender." Ethan nodded, but his confidence felt like a hollow shell. He felt like a man preparing to fight a hurricane with a tennis racket. These weren't just competitors. They were apex predators. The attacks on his firm had been too intimate, too precise. It felt personal. At precisely 9 a.m., the doors to the boardroom opened. 2 figures entered. The first was a man in his 60s, with silver hair, an impeccably tailored suit, and an air of quiet authority. Ethan recognized him from his research. Mr. Peterson, the legendary right-hand man and chief counsel to Vance himself. The fact that Peterson was here in person sent a jolt of alarm through the room. This was a bigger deal than they had imagined, but it was the person who followed him who made the air freeze. She was tall and elegant, moving with a grace that seemed to hush the air around her. She wore a simple but exquisitely tailored navy pantsuit that screamed discreet power and quiet wealth. Her dark hair was pulled back in a sleek, elegant bun, revealing a face that was both familiar and chillingly new. Her features were the same, the high cheekbones, the full lips, the shape of her eyes, but the softness was gone. The warmth, the vulnerability, the look of a woman who worked double shifts at a coffee shop. It had all been burned away, replaced by a polished, unyielding strength. Her eyes, the same deep brown eyes that used to look at him with such adoration, were now cold, analytical, and completely devoid of recognition. They swept the room, over Mr. Coleman, over Chloe, and finally over him, with the distant interest of a queen inspecting her subjects. Ethan's blood ran cold. His heart beat against his ribs. A frantic bird trapped in a cage he had built himself. The smell of rain from a long-forgotten night seemed to fill his nostrils. It couldn't be. It was impossible. "Mr. Coleman," Mr. Peterson said, his voice smooth as silk, "allow me to introduce Ms. A.M. Vance, CEO of our European division." Mr. Coleman stepped forward, his hand outstretched. "Ms. Vance, it's a pleasure. I am Nandos. Mr. Coleman, and this is my daughter Chloe, and our senior vice president, Ethan Thorne." She was Amelia. Amelia didn't extend her hand. She gave Mr. Coleman a brief, almost imperceptible nod. Her gaze lingered on Ethan for a fraction of a second longer, a flash of something unreadable in their depths, before turning opaque once more. "Mr. Coleman," she said. Her voice was the biggest shock of all. It was lower, softer, with the slight, clipped accent of someone educated in the finest European schools. The kind, sincere voice that had whispered, "I love you," was gone, replaced by the cold, measured cadence of command. "Let's not waste time on formalities. My flight back to Geneva is this afternoon." The 3 men stood in stunned silence. Ethan felt the floor had dropped out from under him. His mind reeled, trying to connect the dots. The poor orphan, the Vance Empire, the systematic and targeted destruction of his career. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a plan, a meticulously crafted 5-year act of revenge. Amelia and Mr. Peterson took a seat on the opposite side of the vast table. She placed a slim, leather-bound portfolio in front of her, but she didn't open it. She didn't need to. She already knew everything. "Project Phoenix is failing," she began. Her tone was flat and factual. "Its financing is unstable, Its construction is stalled by regulatory non-compliance, and its public image is shattered. You are losing money and credibility in droves." Mr. Coleman bristled, his face reddening. "Now you look here, Ms. Vance. These are temporary setbacks." "They are not setbacks, Mr. Coleman," Amelia interrupted, her voice cutting through his bluster like a shard of ice. "They are symptoms of a terminal disease within your firm, a disease of over-leveraging and poor leadership." Her eyes flicked to Ethan for a moment. "My firm, through its subsidiary Orion Holdings, now controls the critical path of your project. The news story that exposed your environmental violations came from data we acquired. The pressure on your lender came from us. Every single one of your setbacks over the last 6 months originated from my desk." The confession was delivered so calmly, so matter-of-factly, that it was more devastating than any shouted accusation. It was a declaration of total war. Chloe was the first to find her voice, sharp and incredulous. "You're admitting to corporate sabotage." Amelia turned her head slowly to look at Chloe. "I am admitting to a strategic acquisition of a distressed asset, Ms. Coleman. Your firm was simply too arrogant to see it. You saw an annoyance. I saw an opportunity." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. "We are prepared to offer you 30 cents on the dollar for the entire project. That includes the land, the blueprints, and all associated debt. It's a generous offer. It will save your firm from bankruptcy and allow you to walk away with a shred of dignity." 30 cents on the dollar was an insult. It was a predator's offer designed to bait them. "That's outrageous!" Mr. Coleman slammed his hand on the table. Amelia didn't flinch. "The offer is on the table for 1 hour. After that, it drops to 20 cents, and we will begin foreclosure proceedings on the subcontractor's debt, which will freeze your construction indefinitely and trigger a default on your main loan. The choice is yours." Ethan finally found his voice, a choked, raspy sound. "Amelia." The name hung in the air like a forbidden word. Amelia gave him her full attention for the first time. The mask of the CEO slipped for just a second, and in her eyes, he saw a flash of the woman he had destroyed, a flash of immense, ancient pain now forged into something unbreakable. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice dripping with glacial irony. "Do I know you?" The denial was more brutal than any admission. She was erasing him, erasing his past, erasing everything. He stared at her, the woman he had thrown out in the rain, now sitting across from him, holding the fate of his entire world in her perfectly manicured hands. He had discarded her because he thought she was a nobody. He had just discovered she was a queen, and she had returned to burn his kingdom to the ground. Did Amelia's revenge go too far, or was it the perfect response? Tell us what you think in the comments below. The cost of ambition and the reclaiming of a life. The hour Amelia gave them was the longest hour of Ethan's life. The boardroom, once a symbol of his power and success, became a pressure cooker of panic and recrimination. The moment Amelia and Mr. Peterson left, the facade of unity crumbled. "What the hell was that, Ethan?" Chloe said, her face a streaked purple. "You know her. She used your last name." "No, I knew someone named Amelia years ago," Ethan stammered, his mind a chaotic whirlwind. "A long time ago, she was a nobody, a waitress. She told me she was an orphan. It can't be the same person." "She didn't look like a nobody to me!" Chloe shrieked, her voice shrill with panic. "She looked like she could buy this whole building with her lunch money. And she has it in for us. For you. What did you do to her?" Ethan couldn't answer. How could he explain? "I left her when she was pregnant and penniless to be with you, Chloe. I threw her out in the rain because I thought she was worthless." The truth was a toxic bomb that would annihilate what was left of his life. The firm's legal and financial teams scrambled, running models and making frantic calls. The conclusion was unanimous and grim. Amelia's assessment had been brutally accurate. They were trapped. Her moves had been so strategic, so impeccably executed, that she had them in a corporate checkmate. To reject her offer meant a swift and public bankruptcy. To accept it meant financial ruin, a humiliating defeat from which Coleman and Associates would likely never recover. With minutes to spare, a sweaty, defeated Mr. Coleman made the call. They accepted the offer. Project Phoenix, his legacy, was sold for scraps, but Amelia was just getting started. The acquisition of the project wasn't the end game. It was simply the opening salvo. In the weeks that followed, Ethan's world unraveled, thread by thread. Amelia, operating as the enigmatic A.M. Vance, was an invisible and relentless force. First came the social humiliation. A society gossip columnist, who had once fawned over Ethan and Chloe, ran an anonymous item about a prominent financial bigwig who had brutally discarded his pregnant first wife for a life of luxury. The details were just vague enough to avoid a lawsuit, but specific enough that everyone in their circle knew exactly who it was about. Whispers followed Ethan and Chloe at charity galas and country club dinners. Old friends distanced themselves. Invitations began to dwindle. Next, Amelia went after his professional reputation. She didn't just take over Project Phoenix. She transformed it. Within 2 months under her leadership, the project was rebranded as the Meridian. The regulatory issues disappeared. The financing was restructured with an infusion of capital from Vance Global, and construction resumed at a breakneck pace. She issued a press release not just announcing the project's resurgence, but detailing the prior mismanagement and near-catastrophic leadership under Coleman and Associates, specifically naming Ethan Thorne as the executive who had led it to ruin. He was a pariah in his own office. His colleagues avoided his gaze. The young analysts who once idolized him now looked at him with pity or contempt. Mr. Coleman, his mentor and soon-to-be father-in-law, now looked at him with undisguised hatred. He saw Ethan not as his successor, but as the man who had brought this curse upon his house. The tension in his relationship with Chloe became unbearable. Their arguments were frequent and vicious. "This is all your fault!" she shrieked at him one night in their silent, opulent penthouse. "What you did to that woman, you brought her back as a monster. She's destroying my father's company. She's destroying my life." "Our life," he corrected, his voice desperate. "I did it for us." "There is no us anymore," Chloe replied, her eyes cold. "There is only this disaster you've created. You were supposed to be my partner, an asset. Now you're just a liability, the biggest one I have." The final blow came directly from Amelia. She poached his entire high-performance analysis team, not with simple offers of more money, but with the promise of working on innovative global projects, of being a part of the Vance empire. She offered them a future, something Ethan could no longer provide. He was left with a skeleton crew, an impossible workload, and the ghost of his former success. He began to see her everywhere. A flash of a woman with dark hair getting into a black car, the glimpse of a navy pantsuit in a crowded lobby. He became paranoid, tormented. The city that had been his kingdom now felt like his personal hunting ground. He tried to contact her. He sent emails to her corporate address, pleading for a meeting. They went unanswered. He tried calling her office, only to be politely but firmly blocked by a phalanx of assistants. In one moment of sheer desperation, he even drove to the address of the new project headquarters, the Meridian, hoping to find her. He was stopped at the gate by security and threatened with a restraining order. She had made herself completely inaccessible, a goddess on a mountain, issuing judgments from on high, while he was left to wander in the desolate valley of the consequences she had engineered. He was losing his job, his fiancée, his reputation, his sanity. He had taken everything from her 5 years ago, and she was now paying it back with interest. He realized, with a growing, nauseating horror, that she wasn't just trying to ruin him. She was systematically erasing him from the world he had paid for with her heart. The subpoena arrived on a Friday afternoon. It wasn't a formal invitation, but a simple, stark email from Mr. Peterson's address. Ms. Vance will see you. 4 p.m., the Meridian Building, 50th floor. Come alone. Ethan felt a jolt of terror and a strange, desperate relief. The silent war was over. This was the final confrontation. He spent the next 2 hours in a daze. He showered and put on his best suit, although it felt as if he were dressing a corpse. He looked in the mirror and saw a stranger. The confident, ruthless man who had discarded Amelia was gone, replaced by a gaunt, broken shell. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his hands trembled slightly. The Meridian Building was a shining testament to Amelia's power. It was the old Project Phoenix, reborn as a gleaming glass and steel skyscraper that dominated the city skyline. It was the tombstone of his career. He was escorted by a silent security guard to a private elevator. The ride to the 50th floor was quiet, ascending through the clouds. The doors opened directly into a vast minimalist office. The west wall was a single pane of glass, offering a stunning, godlike view of the city he once thought he owned. Amelia wasn't behind the massive, empty desk. She stood by the window, her back to him, looking down at the world below. "It's a view, isn't it?" she said, her voice quiet and even, without turning. "From up here, everything looks so small, so insignificant." "Amelia," he exhaled, his voice barely a whisper. She turned slowly. Today, she was dressed in a simple, but exquisitely tailored cream-colored dress. She looked serene, powerful, and utterly untouchable. There was no anger on her face, only a deep, chilling stillness. "I asked you not to use that name," she said coldly. "Amelia Thorne died 5 years ago in a stalled car in a nameless alley. You killed her. I am Ms. Vance." "Please," he said, taking a step forward. "We need to talk. What do you want from me?" "Money. I don't have much left, but I'll give you whatever you want. Just make this stop." A small, bitter smile touched her lips. "Money? You think this is about money?" She gestured around the magnificent office. "You have nothing that I could possibly want, Mr. Thorne." She walked to her desk, her movements fluid and deliberate. She didn't sit, but leaned on it, crossing her arms. "For 5 years," she began, her voice a low, melodic blade. "You lived in a penthouse built on a lie. You wore suits paid for by my broken heart. You toasted your success with a woman you traded your soul for. You built a kingdom on my ruins. Did you ever think of me? Of course you did. Don't lie," she interrupted, her voice sharp. "Not anymore. You didn't think of me. You created a convenient narrative where I vanished, a ghost you could safely ignore. Because to truly remember me, to remember what you did, you would have to admit to yourself the kind of man you really are. A coward, an opportunist, and a thief." He flinched as if he had been struck. Every word was a perfectly aimed dart. "I loved you, Ethan," she continued, and for the first time a flash of the old Amelia, a glimpse of pure pain, appeared in her eyes. "I cleaned floors and served greasy food so you could chase your dream, which I thought was our dream. I would have done anything for you. And when I came to you with the most precious news a person can share, the news of our child, you looked at me and saw a liability, a drain on your career. You and that poisonous woman threw me out like garbage." Tears welled in Ethan's eyes. He saw it all again. The rain, her pleading face, the finality of the closing door. "I was a fool," he choked out. "I was ambitious. I was wrong. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "You're sorry?" Amelia laughed, a sound devoid of all humor. Being sorry doesn't bring back the nights I spent in a homeless shelter, terrified, pregnant, and alone. Being sorry doesn't erase the fact that you tried to convince me to extinguish my own child's life for your convenience. She pushed off the desk and walked slowly toward him, circling him like a predator. So no, this was never about money. It was about an accounting, a balancing of the books. You took my home, so I took your firm. You destroyed my name, so I destroyed your reputation. You took my future, so I took yours. An eye for an eye, Mr. Thorne. It's the first rule of business, isn't it? He was now openly weeping, shame and regret washing over him in a nauseating wave. What can I do? I'll do anything to make it right. There is nothing you can do, she said, her voice softening, but not with pity. It was the softness of finality, because you still don't understand what you truly lost. She returned to her desk and picked up a silver-framed photo that had been face down. She turned it over. It was a picture of a little boy, maybe 4 years old, with dark curly hair and Amelia's deep brown eyes. He was laughing, sitting on a swing in what looked like a beautiful sun-drenched garden. He was a perfect, beautiful child. "This is Noah," she said softly. "My son, our son." Ethan stared at the photo, and the full weight of his actions crashed down on him with the force of a physical blow. It wasn't just a career, a fiancé, or a reputation he had lost. It was this child, this laugh, a life, a family. He's beautiful," he stammered, reaching out a hand as if to touch the photo. Amelia pulled it away sharply. "Yes, he is. He's smart and he's kind, and he's the center of my entire universe. Every move I've made, every company I've acquired, every strategy I've deployed has been to build a world for him. A world you will never be a part of." She looked at him, the powerful, untouchable Ms. Vance, and for a fleeting moment, he just saw her as a mother protecting her child. "You have been terminated from Coleman and Associates, effective this morning," her voice said once more. "All business. Chloe Coleman has ended her engagement. Your penthouse is a corporate asset, and you are expected to vacate by the end of the month. You have nothing left, Ethan. I've made sure of it." She turned and placed the photo of her son back on the desk, facing her. "The accounting is complete. The books are balanced. Now get out of my office. Get out of my building. And get out of my life." He stood there, a completely shattered man, stripped of everything. He had discarded her for a kingdom of ambition, and she had returned not just to reclaim her own, but to show him the true, priceless treasure he had thrown away. Ethan staggered out of the Meridian building into the harsh afternoon light, a ghost in a city that no longer knew his name. The world he had so carefully built had been publicly and professionally demolished. The news of his firing was already spreading through the financial world. His phone vibrated incessantly with notifications, emails from HR about his severance, or lack thereof. A terse text from Chloe that simply read, "Don't contact me again," and news site alerts detailing the management change at what was left of Coleman and Associates. He spent the next few weeks in a state of self-pity and despair. He moved into a cheap rental apartment that smelled of stale cigarettes, a place that was a grim echo of the one he and Amelia had once shared. The Maserati was repossessed. The Patek Philippe was sold for a fraction of its value to cover rent. He tried to find work, but Amelia's scorched earth campaign had been exhaustive. His name was toxic. The man who once commanded boardrooms couldn't get a call back for a junior analyst position. On a rainy Tuesday, in a fit of pathetic desperation, he found himself outside a small, exclusive private school. He knew from a deep dive into society blogs that it was where Noah was enrolled. He just wanted a glimpse, a chance to see the son he had lost. He stood across the street, a pathetic figure in a wrinkled suit, as mothers and nannies in immaculate uniforms picked up their children. Then he saw him. Noah bounced down the steps, his small backpack askew, his face lit with a cheerful grin. He was holding hands with Mr. Peterson. The boy chattered non-stop, pointing out a dog on the street, and Mr. Peterson listened with a grandfather's indulgence. They were an image of a happy, normal life, a life Ethan had thrown away. As they approached a waiting luxury car, the back door opened, and Amelia stepped out to greet her son. She knelt down, her powerful CEO persona melting instantly, replaced by the pure, unadulterated love of a mother. She smoothed Noah's hair and hugged him tightly, her face buried in his small shoulder. In that moment, watching them from across the street in the rain, Ethan finally understood. Her revenge was never about destroying him. It was about protecting them. Everything she had done, the corporate takedown, the social exile, was to build a fortress around her new life with her son. A fortress so high and so strong that the man who had hurt her could never touch them again. His destruction was simply a necessary defensive measure. He wasn't the target. He was simply an obstacle that had been removed. Defeated, he turned and walked away, finally accepting his own utter irrelevance. Meanwhile, Amelia's life had just begun. With the chapter on the Colemans closed, her focus shifted completely. The cold fire of vengeance that had driven her for 5 years had served its purpose. It was now extinguished, replaced by the warm, steady glow of purpose. She had proved to her father and to the world that she was not just an heiress, but a brilliant and capable leader in her own right. She earned not just his respect, but his partnership. She established the Noah Foundation, a massive philanthropic effort dedicated to supporting single mothers and providing educational opportunities for underprivileged children. She poured hundreds of millions into it, creating shelters, funding scholarships, and building daycare centers. She used her own painful past as a blueprint to help others build a better future. The girl who once needed a shelter was now building them for thousands. She never remarried. Men were interested, of course. Powerful, wealthy men who were drawn to her intelligence and strength. But her life was full. Her empire was her work, but Noah was her world. Her evenings were not spent at galas, but at home, in her sprawling Geneva estate or her New York penthouse, doing homework, building elaborate Lego castles, and reading bedtime stories. One night, about a year after her final meeting with Ethan, Mr. Peterson found her on the penthouse terrace, looking out at the city lights. Noah was asleep inside. "A letter came for you today," Mr. Peterson said, holding out an envelope. "It's from him." Amelia looked at the plain white envelope. Ethan's name wasn't in the return address, but she knew. She took it, her fingers steady. For a moment, she considered opening it. Maybe it was one last desperate plea. Maybe it was an apology, written with the clarity of a broken man. But then she looked at the city lights, at the Meridian building, shining brightly among them, a monument to her resilience. She thought of her son sleeping peacefully in his bed, safe and loved. She had already written the end of that story. There was nothing left to say. Without reading it, Amelia tore the letter in half, then into quarters, and let the small white pieces of paper flutter from her hand, catching the wind and scattering over the vast, indifferent city below, like the ashes of a life she no longer lived. She had her revenge, but she had found something far more valuable in the process: peace. She was not the wife who was discarded. She was Amelia Vance, the woman who built an empire from the ashes. Not for revenge, but for the future. and her reign had just begun. Amelia's story is a powerful reminder that our deepest wounds can often become the source of our greatest strength. It's a journey from ultimate betrayal to absolute triumph, proving that true revenge isn't about destroying someone else's life, but about building yours into something magnificent and unbreakable. If her incredible journey from a rain-soaked alley to the pinnacle of power moved you, please show your support by hitting that like button. What did you think of her epic revenge plan? Let us know your opinion in the comments below. We read every single one, and for more fascinating stories of resilience and redemption, be sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell. You won't want to miss what comes next.